G'day guys, ZiggyD here. Path of Exile 3.1 is here, and the Abyss Challenge League features these abysses that you'll step on, opening a crack that you can then follow to a series of pits from which abyssal monsters will climb out of. And then at the end, you can get either a treasure trove that will contain some of the new Stygian Belts and or some of the new Abyssal jewels, which are very strong. Here's an example. Here's a belt that I found. These are regular rares, but instead of an implicit, they have an abyssal socket. And then the jewels are very, very powerful. So this is basically occupying a belt implicit. Instead of 40 life, we're getting life, a bunch of damage, and crit multi. Not bad, and they can get better than this. In addition to that, you can, of course, use the abyssal jewels in your actual passive tree as well. So the rewards are quite nice, and I want to show you guys how these kind of work in case you haven't seen them yet and you're interested in maybe considering playing this new league. I highly recommend it. If you like Breach League, this is very much so designed after Breach League, and a bunch of people saying this, they like this more than Breach League. I don't know yet, it's too early to call, but my first impressions from playing 18 hours yesterday is that this was very fun, at least very fun for leveling with. Really like the Abyss's mechanics. There's been a few kind of little kinks in it, and a few things they could improve to make them a little nicer to run, but for the most part, these are really fun. So what's going to happen is eventually, as you're clearing, you'll locate, and they're pretty common. I seem to get one per zone-ish on average, sometimes more. And on your map, you'll see this kind of like little green splodge here, and then you'll kind of see this like little tendrily green, gassy, smoky thing. It looks horrifying. I don't know why you'd ever approach it, but we're going to approach it. What we're going to do is once we step on this, it'll create a crack, and we want to follow that crack as quickly as possible until it reaches a pit, which monsters will pour out of. The pits are the priority. You want to fight monsters on top of the pit as much as possible. Then when you do that enough, it'll either create another crack, which will lead to another pit, and you follow that process again, or you want to, or you'll get a chest, or the entrance to an abyssal depths, which I'll show you guys in another video. So let's go ahead and step on this, and you'll see a crack form. We want to follow this as quickly as possible. We're mostly just going to ignore these other monsters because we want to get here and fight monsters on top of this section here. Some of these rares are really nasty, especially these like flying manta rays that you'll see every now and then. They've got a lot of healing, and they're quite tanky. So as soon as another crack forms, you want to follow that as quickly as possible to the next pit. So fighting on top of this pit, once we get enough kills, it'll either create a chest or it'll spawn another crack. Let's see. So this one has spawned another crack off to the left. If you're having a bit of trouble locating them, just kind of run a circle around it until you see where the crack's gone. Some tile sets are a little harder to see than others, and that's one thing I'd like to see them improve, is just making them a little bit easier to see. Having some like green smoke or something pouring out of them would be nice, I think. So just want to fight on here as much as possible. Once we get enough kills, an Abyssal Trove will spawn. As you can see, they're pretty fast and furious, and it was a little confusing at first, because if you get distracted fighting along the crack, or fighting at one of the earlier pits that is already completed and filled in like this, then you will actually fail it and not get the trove at the end, so you won't get the win result. So don't get distracted. Even if there's like a rare still here, you don't need to kill them. You just need to follow the cracks and fight on any new abyssal pits until a new crack forms, or until you get an abyssal trove. So let's crack open this abyssal trove. As you can see, you'll get a pretty decent amount of loot here while leveling, and then you'll get potentially some Stygian visors, the new belts, and some jewels. So we got 2 jewels, a little bit of currency, some items, and a rare belt there, which is pretty nice. These always seem to drop rare, but the jewels can drop rare or magic, and they can be pretty damn good. There's a phasing elemental bow jewel right there. Not bad, would be pretty nice for leveling. So these things are pretty juicy. The kind of length of them can vary a bit. Sometimes you'll get it so it's just one crack and then a pit, and then you complete it and you'll get the trove. Sometimes they'll be, I've had like ones as long as 5 or 6. There doesn't seem to be kind of any correlation in the amount of loot you get for it, but of course you do get more loot and XP for fighting more monsters, and the monsters themselves can also drop the belts and jewels and things like that. So overall, it's pretty damn rewarding. It feels a bit like Breach, but everything's a bit more kind of centralized. It's not a big kind of circular area that you need to run around the edges like you had to with Breach, which was, I guess, a bit more tiring. And then the picking up of the loot at the end of Breach was, I think, a bit more tedious. You had to pick up all of those splinters. Sometimes you might miss some loot here if you're kind of rushing along, which can be slightly annoying. But for the most part, most of the loot is centralized in this chest and in these little pit areas where you fight the monsters on top of. So all the loot ends up being in one pile, which makes it really nice to pick up. So pretty big fan of Abyss so far. We'll see how it plays out in the end game, but I wanted to give you guys this first look just so you can see how the Abysses work and how to actually approach them to maximize your success on them, because if you get distracted in the earlier parts of it, you'll miss out on a lot of loot, and that happened to me quite a few times just while leveling until I figured it out. So hopefully you guys find this helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. If you have any tips for this, or any interesting things you've noticed in the new league, there's so much new stuff, it's exciting, then let us know in the comments below. Anyway guys, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.